It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Ray Mariano.
I want you to imagine for a minute that your grandfather was just elected President of the United States. Now think about it. Your grandfather was a great man, beloved by his fellow Americans, and he was elected because people believed that he would raise up the entire country. He ran on a platform that said, if we raise up the lowest among us, we'll all go with them. Now, he wanted to help as many people as he could, but there were some problems. When he was elected, the country faced a terrible problem. There was this disease, and it affected millions of people all across the country. Men, women, children, entire families. Now, your grandfather didn't know how to solve the problem, but he knew where to start. So he called some of the finest minds in the country together. He brought them into the Oval Office and said, look, I'm not sure what the answer is, but you got to figure it out. We've got fellow citizens who are hurting. They need your help. And I want you to go out there. Don't worry about the money. Let me figure that out. Spend what you got to spend, but let's solve the problem. And so they went to work. And it took them a while, and they spent billions of dollars. But one day they came in and said, Mr. President, we have an antidote, something that we can use to help the people in our country that are suffering. Now, your grandfather was a wise man, and he knew that you can't just walk around with a teacup and a spoon and give medicine to people who need help. It's a big country. And so he had to put in place a vast bureaucracy to administer the antidote. And it cost billions of dollars and took a great deal of time to do, but they worked very hard, and soon enough, they were administering the antidote in the state of Washington, in Oregon, in Nevada, in California, in Texas, and up here in Maine, and Massachusetts, and Florida. And then they waited. And at the beginning, they were encouraged because the symptoms of the disease seemed to go away. Now, fast forward 50 years, 2016, and now you have been elected President of the United States. You've walked down Pennsylvania Avenue, you raised your right hand, you swore to uphold the Constitution, and you gave your inaugural address. Now you go into the Oval Office, you sit in the chair behind the desk, and you're just kind of getting comfortable saying, I'm the President of the United States. And your aide runs in, looks at you and says, Madam President, we have a problem. Well, we should have a Madam President, right? He said, Madam President, we have a problem. And you said, well, I just got here, what's the problem? Remember that disease that your grandfather worked on and we thought he had fixed? He didn't fix it. As a matter of fact, the disease is worse. The people who were originally afflicted, that problem was passed down to their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. Generations of families and children are crippled as a result. The disease is more profound than ever. So you're the president. What do you do? In America, I can tell you what we do. We make the same medicine all over again. We give it to millions of our fellow citizens, even though we know it doesn't work. We spend billions, even trillions of dollars, even though we know it doesn't work. And what's worse, we'll fight anybody who wants to try to change the formula for the antidote. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of public housing in America. Now, homelessness is not a disease, but it is a very serious problem that affects millions and tens of millions of our fellow Americans. Each year, we spend billions of dollars trying to solve the problem of homelessness, and our solution has been a disaster. We've actually made the problem worse, yet we stubbornly refuse to change the formula. Public housing, think about this. Public housing was originally targeted for veterans returning from World War II, veterans like my dad. It was supposed to be transitional. Now, it was expanded during Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. Everyone in the country wanted to help people who needed a roof over their head. It's a good thing. It's an honorable thing. People wanted to reach out to their fellow citizens and give them a helping hand. But if you look at the system and what it's produced, by every measure, it's been an abject failure. Now, in Worcester, like so many other housing authorities, this is what we know. I want you to think about this very carefully, and I know that most of you know this, but particularly in urban areas. In Worcester, 70 to 80% of the adults who live with us are unemployed. 70 to 80%. 40% of our adult residents don't have a high school diploma or a GED. This number surprised me. More than 50%, actually 54.2% of our adult residents don't even have a driver's license. And in Worcester, you can't go to work if you don't have a driver's license because the bus isn't going to get you there. Our kids in Worcester are more likely to know somebody who's been arrested or sent to prison than somebody in their family who has a 4-year college degree or has held a full-time job for a sustained period of time. In no other neighborhood are these statistics acceptable. Think about the last presidential election. Mitt Romney against Barack Obama. If the unemployment rate cracked 8% on election day, Mitt Romney would have been the president and Barack Obama would have been a one-term president. In public housing, it's 10 times that, and nobody bats an eye. That can't be right. One of the reasons, in my opinion, is that the current system asks nothing of our residents. It's as if they are incapable of doing anything special. So we redesigned the system, and I want to tell you about it today. We based it on 4 pillars. We built this new system on 4 pillars. Number 1, we believe in our residents. We believe that they can do great things. They don't need to just sit there. We think they can do the same things that anyone else can do. Number 2, we set high standards. It's not acceptable in America today not to have a high school diploma. It's not acceptable not to go to work. It's not acceptable not to dream about college and all those other things that all of us dream for ourselves and for our children. Number 3, we hold them accountable. These are things that they have to do as part of their contract with us. And number 4, and this is the most important part, we have to help them get there. We know that the challenges and barriers that they face are significant, and they're not going to get there in many cases without some help from us. Now, I want to tell you that I couldn't believe in public housing more. I spent 20 years of my life growing up in public housing. My dad was a disabled veteran. My mother is an immigrant. I'm the oldest of 9 children. All 9 of us grew up in public housing, spent 20 years living there. All 9 of us moved out. All 9 of us have our own homes. Several of my sisters have several homes. And we pay for taxes for other folks to move into public housing. I believe in public housing. I believe it's important, but I believe that the way that we provide it is wrong and that it hurts the very people that it was intended to help. So we started with a private grant. We have an organization in central Massachusetts called the Health Foundation. And the Health Foundation gave us a grant to plan. And so we went out and we studied what other housing authorities had done. We went to Atlanta and other places to look at what they've did. And then we came back and we created a model. This model starts with intensive case management, not the kind of case management that you get in FSS. As a matter of fact, if you were to describe our program, it would be FSS on steroids. It is similar to FSS, it's just far more intense. When we have case management meetings, if they're not in our office, we're in their kitchen, talking to them about what they're doing. And it's on a much more frequent basis. Every one of our participants goes through 5 assessments with our partners. We have a number of community partners that help us. So we assess their education. Do they speak English well? Are they able to go into a community college, or are they better prepared to go into a certificate program? Our partner looks and gives us a comprehensive assessment. We assess their health and the health of every member in the family, because guess what? Mom ain't going to work if the child has a toothache. So we make sure they have a dentist and all the other things that they need. We assess their finances, and we also assess their personal lives. If a woman is the victim, for example, of domestic violence, she's not going to work every day. We've got to deal with that problem first. So we assess these 5 areas and we provide a comprehensive plan for that person to work with the case manager. By the way, we call our case managers family life coaches. And we go out and try to help them deal with those issues, those challenges, those barriers, and get them going in the right direction. And we've had great success. So we start the program up, and I know that we're going to have a great deal of success. We're going to have a lot of people signing up because this program is pretty terrific. And we offer it to 1,200 families. And I have an argument with our funder. And I say, look, she wants, we have Boston University School of Public Health is going to study and watch people through the program. So they have a cohort of 30 people not in the program. So that's the control group, and they're going to see what they're doing. And then they're going to take 30 additional people in the program, and they're going to see what the differences are. And I'll tell you about the results of that in a minute. And she said, so you're going to enroll 30 people in the program? I said, heck no. I'm going to enroll 50 or 60 or 70. I don't care who raises their hand and signs up. If they come to me and ask for help, we're going to give it to them. And she said, well, you can't because we can only take 30. And we argued back and forth, and it didn't make any difference because I couldn't get 30 people to sign up. We tried our best. We knocked on doors. We made phone calls. And every time we'd get 30 people signed up, 3 or 4 of them would drop out because it was too difficult. I can remember one woman walked into the office, and she said, all right, I want to sign up. And she came back the next week and said, where's my house? And because we said, would you like to own a home? That was one of the pitches, you know. And she said, well, where's my house? I said, well, it's going to take a little longer than a week. So the folks who are in the voluntary portion of the program did remarkably well. And many of them moved out of public housing. We had this one gentleman, if you go on our website, you'll see some of the videos. And I asked them off camera a number of questions. And I said, what do you want to get out of this program? And he looked at me and he said, and he was embarrassed because he thought he was insulting me. And he said, I just want to get out of public housing. And I said, man, that's the right answer. That's exactly the kind of answer. That guy's doing terrific. He bought his own house. He ended up with $20,000 in escrow because he was working so hard. And we had to stop him. He was running down the street looking to give the money to somebody so he could buy a house. He just wanted out. And people like that are easy to help because they're so excited. But we knew on a voluntary basis that we couldn't make the program have a real impact. So we said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it a requirement. And we're going to give an admissions preference. Phase 1, the voluntary program. Phase 2, the admissions preference. We're going to say to people on our waiting list. Now, in Worcester, we have over 10,000 people on all of our waiting lists. And most of our waiting lists are closed. You can't even get on the waiting list because we have too many people on there. We have over 10,000. We have people who've been waiting for years who are homeless. So we said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say to this guy who's been homeless for 3 years, been on the waiting list for 3 years, we're going to say, look, would you like an apartment? We're going to make you, you're not 256 on the list anymore. We're going to put you number 1. We're going to move you all the way to the top of the list. But for that, you have to agree to go to work or go to school or do community service. And I'll tell you the details of that program in a second. And of course, we said, look, we've got all these people on the waiting list. I can't send letters to everybody because we're going to get deluged with people saying they want to be in the program. So we sent out 558 letters to a test group. And 6.7% of the people said yes. And that was my reaction. And 93.3% of the people said, yeah, not so much, I'd rather be homeless. And I was stunned. Now the good news is because our waiting lists are so long and we had so many people, we have plenty of people to fill all of our vacates with people who are part of our program, the Better Life program. But 6.7% of the people said yes, and the rest of the folks said, I'll stay on the list, but I don't want to have to go to work. So here's what phase 2 requires you to do. It requires you to go to work, go to school, or do community service 30 hours a week. Now, if you do community service, you do it right outside your front door. You just walk outside. We'll have something for you to do. You can walk to the corner management office. You can file papers. You can walk around distributing flyers. You can pick up papers for us. You can help us do a wide range of things. Community service is pretty easy. You don't have to go very far. We will help you find a job. We have a guy whose job it is to be an employment specialist and help folks find jobs. We have a series of classes that we offer. We call them life skill classes. Computer literacy, financial literacy, job readiness classes, all kinds of things that we offer right in our community. We offer it right in one of our developments, in one of our community rooms on a regular basis. It looks like a little mini college catalog, and it's there for free. And you get credit if you go to those classes for the number of hours that you participate. But it's every adult who is not elderly and not disabled. If you are of one of those two things, you are exempt from the requirement. And the results have been far beyond what I would have imagined, what I would have hoped for. In fact, we have doubled the number of people employed from about 36% to more than 75%. We have tripled their wages. For a period of time, the wages were $800,000 to $1.8 million. It was actually less than $800,000 to $1.8 million. And we've tripled the number of people attending school from about 15 or 16% to 44%. It's way beyond what I would have expected. Now, I will tell you that there's still a lot more work for us to do. And I'm pretty excited about the results, as maybe you can tell. And so we said, well, but we're only letting people in one at a time, and we're never going to get to everybody. So what are we going to do? So what we said was, here's what we're going to do. We're now going to go back to everybody who's living in the community, and we're going to say, I know you've been living there for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. Guess what? Now you got to go to work. And there was a little pushback, but nothing I can't handle. And so we implemented, with the support of the governor and the lieutenant governor, we implemented a new program. This is phase 3 now of the program, which says, and phase 3 is less onerous than phase 2. Phase 2, you get a benefit. You get to move into public housing. You get to jump the waiting list. Phase 3, you're already living there. So we said, we'll make it easy for you. You only have to work 23 hours a week on an average, 1,200 hours in a year. No community service, but it's school or work, 23 hours a week, and it only applies to one adult in the family. So father, mother, and an adult child. The adult child is in community college full-time. No one else in the family has to do anything. Father, mother, adult child, dad goes to work. The other two are off the hook. Single mom, one child, mom's got to go to work or go to school. We offer GED, ESL right on the property, and that counts. We let that count as well. And you do not in phase 3. Phase 2, you have to participate in case management. Phase 3, you do not. Now, as I told you earlier, Boston University School of Public Health has been tracking our participants and another group of folks who have not participated in the program. And their results mirror ours. They're not exactly the same because our group is much larger. But they found some other interesting things. And one of the things they found was the level of domestic violence suffered by the women who live with us dropped in half. We're not really sure why that is, except we know that the vast majority of people who live with us are female, single moms, single family head of household, and they experience a high level of domestic violence. That number dropped in half, and we're pretty excited about that. Now, you heard that I used to be the mayor of Worcester. In fact, I've done political campaigns all over the country, and I know a little bit about politics. And I can tell you that in all of my years of doing this stuff, I have never seen, short of an issue like 9/11 or some grave catastrophe, I have never seen an issue that has gathered more public support than this one. When I started, I remember I went home and said to my wife, I said, well, I've got this new program. She said, oh God, what now? And I said, well, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And she said, oh, why? You're going to get in trouble. And I said, I know. And I'm telling you because I want to prepare you, because people are going to get you at the market and they're going to give you a hard time. And she's kind of used to that. You know, when you're a mayor's wife, you get used to that stuff. So she kind of braced herself and I kind of braced myself. And guess what? People thought it was wonderful for all kinds of reasons. I mean, I went one day, everything's fine, thank goodness, but I went one day, I'm in an emergency room with a family member, and I'm waiting to get the results of tests, and I've got nurses running over to me saying, "You're Ray Mariano, and I just want to tell you what you're doing is wonderful, and you're going to be helping so many people." And then there comes another nurse, "Oh, is that Ray Mariano? And I want to tell you about this." And I'm sitting in church, halfway back on a Sunday, getting ready, saying my prayers, getting ready for communion, and in the homily, pastor gets up and he starts talking about my program. And I'm embarrassed. I'm thinking, oh, geez, but he's saying this is the Christian thing to do. It's the wonderful thing to do. And everywhere I go, people say this is terrific. Now, there are a small group of people who think this is awful. They think it's the devil's work. And they think I'm just a terrible person for proposing it. And they fight really hard against the program. And here's their view. Their view is that you can't force anyone to go to work. They should go when they're ready. I gave a presentation at a conference, and I said kind of what I told you about the program, and this is what we're doing, and these are the results. And there were a group of housing advocates, and one of the ladies, a very nice lady, she had received an award that day for all of her hard work for homelessness, and someone who has devoted herself to the cause. She stood up and she said, she said, "I disagree with you." She said, "I don't think you can force anyone to go to work. You have to wait until they're ready." And so I got up and I said, well, now let me tell you something. For some of these families, we've waited 5 generations. That's long enough. We have literally traced, because I found out when I became executive director that there were kids, they aren't kids anymore, they're grown adults, but there were people there that I grew up with that were still living there, and their families and their kids and their grandkids were all living there. And so we grabbed a couple families and we checked. One of the families that we checked, lovely family by the way, 5 generations. We traced 5 in the same development. I mean, they didn't even move to the next development. In the same development, we have families that have been there for generations. When I started, I'd go out with the housing managers, and we'd go out late at night because it's an urban area and we had some bad guys to get off the property. So we'd go out at night and they'd say, "Oh yeah, there's the Mariano family, and they also live over there, and there are other members of the Mariano family over there." And I started asking questions, and you'd say, "Oh yeah, that's the grandmother, that's the aunt, that's the grandniece." And I thought, that can't be right. That's not how this is supposed to work. Like I said, I grew up in public housing, and I get why it's needed, but 5 generations is too long. 3 generations is too long. And so what we're trying to do is break a cycle of intergenerational poverty that has become ingrained. It's sort of a perverse legacy that gets passed down from one generation to another. I've got one of my youngest son, who's a lawyer, graduated from the University of Michigan. And so we're all excited about the University of Michigan. We watch the football games, the basketball games, and someday he will have a child if some woman is silly enough to marry him, and he wants him to go to Michigan. As a matter of fact, his brother has just had a baby, and on the wall he's got the University of Michigan pin-up on the wall. It's a legacy. You pass it down. This is what you want. The University of Michigan is an outstanding school. This is what you want for your child. You shouldn't pass down public housing. That shouldn't be the legacy that you leave to your children, yet, in fact, it is. I'm going to answer some questions if you have them, but let me just leave you with a couple of stories. Now, I know that the people who live with us face real barriers to being successful, real barriers to learning a new language and health and all kinds of problems. These are serious barriers, and we have to help them through those challenges. But it shouldn't be appropriate that you not even try. So one day I was having breakfast on Cape Cod with my brand new grandson and the rest of my family, my kids and my wife, and there was a fella in the table, next table, and I hadn't seen him in a while. It's a little kind of a diner place on Cape Cod, and he looked over and I saw him and I said, "Bobby, how are you?" and kind of waved, and he came over and he said, "I want to tell you, Ray, that I've been watching what you're doing. I'm retired now, but I've been watching what you're doing." He said, "And I'm really excited about what you're doing." He said, "Nothing gives someone a sense of value more than a job." And he said, "I ought to know." When he held up where he used to have two hands, has no hands. Bobby got hurt in an industrial accident. He now has hooks where his hands used to be. Had to go back to school. He worked on a line for the electric company. Had to go back to school, get an education, learn a new trade, and then he went back to work. And he said to me, Ray, if I could go to work every single day with no hands, anyone can go to work every single day. And here's my last story. So I debate a lawyer who teaches students at Harvard Law School. My son was a student at the law school at the time. And so they have this big group, because everyone wants to hear about the program, so they have this big group, Democratic students and Republican students and all these folks, and they're all crowded into this room. And this very bright woman and I debated the program. I told everyone about the program and why I thought it was important. She told everyone why I was the devil and why my program was terrible. And when she was done telling them about why the program wasn't all that good, I stood up and said this. I said, look, we know the results of the current system. 70 to 80% unemployed, 40% without a high school diploma or a GED, 50% without driver's licenses. We know the results. So the current system is a failure. If you have a plan to fix it, tell me what it is. I'll rip mine up right now, throw it in the basket, and we'll go do yours. But if you don't have a plan, then get the heck out of my way, because there are families that need our help. They need my help. I was one of those families, and I want to make sure that what we do is help every family that we can. I tell my staff this. I tell them, when you go to work in the morning, look up at the building and imagine that it's on fire. And your job is to run in that building, grab one of those families, and drag them out. And find a way to get them out of there. And if they don't want to go, you have to make them go. And that's what we're doing in Worcester. Thank you very much.